Top of the hour here on News Now. We come on the air again, I should say, with this developing story we've been following. I'm Tom Costello in for Hallie Jackson, and we are following the developments pouring in by the minute. And right now, we are sifting through thousands of records from the Epstein files that have just dropped. We're talking several gigabytes of information here now released by the Justice Department related to nearly 2 decades worth of government investigations into Epstein's sexual abuse of young women and underage girls. We're learning some of these items released are photos that had not been made public previously. Many of these photos highly sexual in nature. Other documents include heavily redacted phone records. Other photos, like this one we're going to show you, include people you will recognize, including former President Bill Clinton, appearing to show him in a hot tub next to a person whose face has been redacted. Important to note here, this does not imply any wrongdoing by Mr. Clinton. We still do not know when this was, whose face was redacted, and what context this photo was actually taken in. The White House saying in a statement just moments ago, coming into us, that the Trump administration is the most transparent in history. Going on to say that by releasing these documents, the Trump administration has done more for the victims than Democrats ever have. We've got team coverage on this story. NBC's Ryan Nobles is here in Washington. NBC's Danny Savalos has our legal analysis, and Yamiche Alcindor is covering this all from the White House. Tom Winter also reporting on these developments in New York. Ryan, can we first talk about what we are seeing, what you are seeing, and probably should be setting the record straight that, in fact, the Trump administration fought not to have these documents released and then finally gave in when it appeared that they had lost the vote in Congress.
That's right, Tom. And there are a number of people on Capitol Hill that are pouring through these documents to see if they feel confident that the Department of Justice has followed the letter of the law here and releasing all the files that they have available to them in a way that the American people can easily get through them. And, at this point, we are just really cracking the surface of what are hundreds of thousands of documents. There are images, there are videos, there are court filings, there are interview transcriptions, and we are starting to see little things start to trickle out. For instance, you're showing those pictures of Bill Clinton as an example. There are pictures of many other celebrities as well that we're starting to uncover. But already the initial response from particularly Democrats in Congress who had concerns about the level of compliance from the Department of Justice, in particular because President Trump himself was so much opposed to the release, initially opposed to release of this files, is that they feel that this release is underwhelming. First of all, they are unhappy with the fact that the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche made it clear that not all the files are going to be released today, that it could take another 2 weeks before we see everything that the Department of Justice has at its disposal. They are also concerned about the level of redactions in the files that were released here today. Ro Khanna, who is one of the authors of the law that required this disclosure, has said that the Department of Justice needs to come and sit down with Congress and explain each and every redaction to see whether or not they are in compliance. And then the third reason that we're starting to see some kind of disappointment with this initial release is that the law clearly states that there has to be a search bar, a search tool, that it would make it easy for people who are looking through these documents to find information pertaining to a certain topic or person that they might be interested in learning more about. And there is a toolbar there, but it is inoperable. If you put in any name, like, for instance, if you put in something as obvious as Jeffrey Epstein, it returns no results. And so there's going to take some time, I think, to work out the kinks. It's important to keep in mind that they have until midnight to fully comply with that. So if that search bar is up and running by midnight, then that would be a level of compliance. But the members of Congress that have taken this initial look right now are very disappointed and have warned the Department of Justice that they will seek consequences if they do not take the effort to be fully in compliance, Tom.
Let's underscore, though, Ryan, and you cover Capitol Hill, the law states that all the files had to be released today.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the 2-week period, I mean, the argument that members of Congress have, first of all, is that they have had a month since the release or since the law was passed. But they go back even further. And, there have been calls to release these files for decades. So the idea that they wouldn't be in a position to get this out to the public at least the Democrats in Congress feel is an empty excuse, like that this information should have been ready to go today to be in compliance with the law.
Yeah, and to be clear, this was a bipartisan law that was passed. Tom Winter, who covers investigations for us and law enforcement. Tom, what else stands out to you as you've been reading through these documents?
Yeah, just to give you a high-level overview, Tom, there's obviously gigabytes of data, as you mentioned. What they were able to do is take the documents and scan them into PDF, or photographs and scan them into PDF form, and that's how you're able to go through them. The documents are available to the public, as well as us, obviously, on the Justice Department's website. One thing that sticks out to me is just how much material is in here that has been redacted as it pertains to young girls, and some of the material is particularly graphic in nature. There's a number of photographs that have been redacted in part or in full that appear to show naked women and perhaps naked girls who are under the age of 18 as well. And this would have been in Epstein's possession and been seized by the FBI in accordance with the search warrant. So that speaks to a little bit about what they found. What we found was something that was kind of interesting here. It's this document. If you can take my shot full, it's redacted here as it should be. This would be redacted consistent with other redactions I've seen in the past. And what it shows us is an effort by the FBI to travel to Sydney, Australia, and then conduct an interview in another part of the country in an ongoing investigation into Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And you might say, well, Tom, obviously they were doing that, and obviously they were traveling for interviews. That would be true. Except for this request came in March of 2011 by the FBI field office in Miami and their Palm Beach squad, which was looking into apparently an investigation they kept cooking after Epstein had already pleaded out to state charges and signed that non-prosecution agreement. So it's clear that the FBI in Florida did not give up on this investigation even after Epstein had signed that NPA, and certainly after what appears that they received new information. This was after somebody reached out to federal prosecutors in Miami. We are also now starting to see, in the course of looking over these documents, information that the FBI New York field office put together in connection with their investigation in 2019, the grand jury subpoenas, the New York State DMV records that would contain where they could send subpoenas to potential victims, it appears, because a significant amount of the folders and filings are redacted. So TC, that's just a bit of a sense of what we're looking at here. There's obviously some very disturbing information. If there's not anything that grounds us more in the gravity and the sadness of what this case was, it's clearly apparent for anybody who's going through these documents today.
So, Tom, you are a veteran of looking through court documents and law enforcement documents. As you look through these, you know what all of the conspiracy theories out there. Is there any evidence yet that a name has been redacted? A name of a high-profile person, not just individuals, not just young ladies and underage girls?
Sure. Sitting here at 5:08 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday afternoon, having looked through a couple of percentage points of the documents that the Justice Department says they're releasing today, I have not seen any names that have been redacted that would stick out to me as a potential subject or target of investigation or an uncharged third party. So I haven't seen that yet. The redactions, as I just mentioned here, they typically redact the names of specific FBI agents. The person that they're looking to interview in Australia might be a victim. That name is redacted. So everything that I'm looking at here, there's two uncharged parties who I believe I know who they are. And without asking them for comment, it'd be a little unfair for me to disclose their names here. But those individuals are all redacted, and that's all the information I would typically see redacted. Same type of thing. I mean, there are huge files here, Tom, that are phone records, but those are always generally redacted when they're released to the public and not part of evidence, because that's personally identifying information is consistent with Justice Department policy, as frustrating as it might be for reporters like us.
Understood. You and the team have a lot of work ahead of you. Tom, thank you. Let's go to Yamiche Alcindor at the White House. And Yamiche, we've heard from the White House now on this, and we're also now getting a lot of back and forth from the president. He didn't always support the release of these documents. In fact, he didn't support it until it was clear he was losing that vote in Congress, right?
That's right, Tom. This was a story that President Trump tried to push away. He tried to tell his supporters that they were not being smart by focusing on Jeffrey Epstein, by asking for these files over and over again. But it was really this revolt within the Republican Party that then pushed President Trump to support the Jeffrey Epstein Transparency Act that then was passed by Congress and that the president signed into law that essentially told the DOJ that they had to release these files. Now, today, as these files are now being released, the White House here is saying that they were seeking transparency, but they were not acknowledging that the president was vehemently against releasing these files. I want to read to you part of that White House statement that came out. You read part of it. The other part of it is that the president saying, while President Trump is delivering on his promises, Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries and Stacey Plaskett have yet to explain why they were soliciting money and meetings from Epstein after he was a convicted sex offender. The American people deserve answers. So this is a White House that is now sort of trying to push this and make this political and specifically call out Democrats. We've also already seen the White House press secretary online reposting that photo of former President Bill Clinton, a Democrat, in that hot tub. As a number of her colleagues have said, there's no evidence of wrongdoing in that photo, but it is a photo that is striking to see a former president in a hot tub. And there is someone next to him whose face is redacted. We don't know, of course, who that person is. But here's the White House essentially pushing and saying, well, look at what the Democrats are doing here. I think it'll be very interesting to see what these other files pull out, whether or not there are going to be more photos possibly of President Trump. The other thing I should note is that the president had an announcement here around 1 o'clock this afternoon. A lot of reporters went. The president would not take questions. And that is striking because this is the president who often talks to reporters. But on a day like today, where there are a lot of questions about Jeffrey Epstein, the president decided he didn't want to take questions. We might see him again out on the White House lawn later this evening. Of course, we want to get those questions answered. But as of now, the White House, other than this statement, has not said anything else.
Yamiche, any comment at all from the Clinton, not the administration, but the Clinton camp about that photograph?
Our colleagues have reached out to Bill Clinton and his camp and his office, and so far we have not received a comment as of now about that bathtub photo or about the release of these files overall, Tom.
Yamiche, thanks. Danny, let's go to you for the legal analysis here. And what are the things, what kinds of things are we seeing here? The redacted items here, things that the Justice Department simply can't release. And I guess the question is, are they all names and photographs of young underage women?
The short answer right now is largely we don't know. That's the magic of redactions, is you often don't know exactly what's behind it, and redaction exists in the eye of the beholder, the person who originally makes the redaction and the decision to redact. So this release was always going to be controversial because if you just look at the wording of the statute, reasonable minds are going to differ on what constitutes or what is within the statute's power to DOJ to withhold or redact. And when you ask about what we can expect to see redacted, you look no further than the language of the statute under permitted withholding. And the Attorney General can withhold things that, for example, contain personally identifiable information of victims or victims' personal or medical files. And all of that language, as you go into similar files or related to or concerning, those are words that are a large tent with a lot of space underneath, and a lot of people are going to disagree about what is related to victims or what is related, for example, something that might jeopardize an active federal investigation. We don't know exactly yet, as we're just going through this, what might be in the DOJ's mind possibly affecting an investigation. But we know, and candidly, I think many of us expected, we would see gigantic swaths of fully redacted pages. I don't know that I've ever seen the completely redacted page with no white whatsoever, but I've seen close to it. And we're seeing a lot of that. It's exactly what I expected.
Danny, thank you. Stand by if you don't mind. You've got a lot of work also ahead of you, but we'll check back. Hallie Jackson is joining us now on the phone. And Hallie, you've been speaking to some of the Epstein survivors. You've been in touch with them for quite a long time now. How are they reacting now to this moment?
And you have to remember, and Tom, it's good to be with you, you have to remember that this exact moment, this afternoon, this development that we've been spending the last hour and 10 minutes talking about is exactly what so many of them have said they've wanted to see for months. And you know that we've had a number of conversations with some of these Epstein survivors. And this has been the culmination of a fight that they have been public about, that they have traveled to Washington for, that many of them have done, pursued at great, personal expense, candidly, emotionally, financially, and otherwise. And so I think at this moment, for this day, it is obviously it is the next step for them in transparency and accountability. I have to tell you, Tom, I think it's also really emotional. One thing that I heard again and again in these conversations is that every time there's some development in the news, right, in the headlines about the Epstein case, it is re-traumatizing for so many of these survivors. And I think that it is. Tonight, you're seeing the vivid images, you're seeing the photographs, you're seeing some of these places where the worst moments of some of these women's lives occurred. And so while there is, I think, a sense of moving forward, of sort of, quote, finally this happening, these documents, this set of documents, this first tranche of documents being released, I think there's also some really difficult emotions here for some of these people. And I'll say we have heard from one of them already, just as the release of the files is happening, and that's Maria Farmer, who said, this is a moment, to the point that we're just talking about, Tom, she says, this is a moment for which I have waited 3 decades for, over half my life. She goes on to say that she's hopeful she'll finally be able to pick up where she left off at age 26, and that this will be an important step for many of the survivors to hold the government accountable for what she calls their grotesque law enforcement failure. And so I think even in that statement from Maria Farmer, you see that, the idea that this is the next step in accountability, and that this is, obviously an emotional moment, I think, for many. I want to play a little bit of one of my conversations with a group of survivors where we talked about, alluded to this moment, Tom, what this could mean for people. Let me play it.
With the show of hands here, how many of you want to see more documents released publicly related to the Epstein case? Every single one of you. Marika, why?
Alone we are afraid, together we are feared.
And I think what you hear there, Tom, is really powerful. The idea that for so many of these women, and this is another really common thread that I've heard over the course of my interviews, watching these women speak publicly over and over again, is that they feel like there is power in numbers. This is a phrase I've heard. Courage is contagious. The idea that once Virginia Roberts Giuffre came forward and really used her voice as an advocate for the women that she called her survivor sisters, that it gave strength to others to be able to do the same thing. And that is, I will say, a fairly recent development, just maybe in the last few years or so, according to some of the women and some of the survivors that I've spoken with here. And so I think it's an incredibly important night. It is also, I think, in many ways, Tom, not the end. It is, in fact, a new beginning. And I've had some of the survivors use that exact language to me, that this is the start of sort of the next phase of the fight for justice and accountability and transparency, a fight that is so critical and so deeply, deeply personal for so many of them, Tom.
Yeah, and Hallie, your reporting and your interviews have been so compelling and have really added to the pressure to get these files released. Thank you very much. Hallie, by the way, will be on NBC Nightly News on Sunday, and then, of course, back on the air here next week. And thank you also to the team, including Ryan Nobles, Denny Savalos, and Yamiche Alcindor as well. Now to another big story that we're watching here at NBC News Now. We have new details about the Reddit poster who helped lead police to a breakthrough in the Brown and MIT murder investigations, though a possible motive is still unknown. Rhode Island's Attorney General confirms that the Reddit poster referred to as John is seen in this surveillance video at the same time as the suspect who appears there in that blue circle. John is seen walking by in that red circle on your screen. John told investigators he encountered the suspect multiple times on the day of the Brown University shooting, where 2 students were killed, 9 others injured. Investigators now say that suspect also killed an MIT professor in Massachusetts just 2 days later. The suspect and the professor both studied engineering at the same school in Portugal more than 20 years ago. Police have been searching for the suspect for days with seemingly no leads until yesterday, when the suspect was identified as the man you're seeing right there on your screen. He was then found dead with self-inflicted gunshot wounds at a storage unit in New Hampshire. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin is following this story from us from Providence, Rhode Island. And Aaron, the question everybody wants to know is why, but it sounds like really police at this point don't have any evidence to answer that question.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. They're still gathering that evidence, trying to answer that question. Authorities to me today said that they believe that the attack on the MIT professor may have been personal, given that they went to school together in Lisbon decades ago. But in terms of the attack here at Brown, they know he had links to the university, that he was briefly enrolled in the physics program decades ago that he likely took classes in the building that he later attacked. But in terms of why he opened fire on a room full of students that he likely did not know remains a mystery. Meanwhile, tonight, we are hearing from officials in terms of the autopsy results. Officials now estimate, based on those results, that he killed himself on December 16th, 3 days ago, a day after shooting and killing the MIT professor. Tom.
Also, probably worth mentioning that the MIT professor is a superstar, or was a superstar in physics, and the suspect took classes in physics in Portugal, also at Brown University. Do we have any feeling, though, for how he evaded police for so long?
Well, I mean, speaking to officials here in Rhode Island, they are characterizing this as a meticulously planned attack. It is very clear from the evidence they have gathered so far that he really worked to evade authorities. Take a listen to what the Attorney General had to say.
He was not using traditional cell phone service. He was using voice over internet protocols. He was really using Wi-Fi, at unsecured Wi-Fi to access data. He was not using traditional credit cards, which is how, sometimes law enforcement can follow people's movements. None of these are secret techniques.
So the big break in the case came with a man that officials are only identifying as John. John came forward and told authorities that he was in the building hours before the attack when he encountered the suspect, then chased him out of the building. The footage shows him pursuing him on foot. And then at one point, Valenti, the suspect, passed his rented Nissan car. His fob inadvertently set off the lights on the Nissan, alerting John to the fact that that was his car. He recognized that and then later told authorities that car was later the key, I am told by officials here in Rhode Island, to cracking the case and tying the two attacks together. Really extraordinary set of circumstances. Yeah. I asked the police chief if that fob had not gone off, would they have been able to solve this case? He said eventually they would have tracked down every car in this area and reached those conclusions, but it would have taken a lot more time. Tom.
What a perceptive witness that John was, and reporting it to police. Aaron, thank you very much. Russian President Vladimir Putin is sticking to his hardline demands for ending the war in Ukraine, despite U.S. pressure for a peace deal. Here he is on Russian television today.
We are willing to put an end to this conflict via peaceful means based on the principles that I outlined in July last year when I spoke at the Foreign Ministry of Russia. The root causes that brought about this conflict have to be addressed.
Putin answered questions for 4.5 hours at his annual year-end news conference, largely focused on the war. He touted Russia's military position, arguing the army is on the move, and said it's up to Ukraine and the rest of Europe to end the war. Meanwhile, U.S. negotiators are meeting with representatives from both the Kremlin and Kyiv and Miami, trying to get a peace agreement across the line. President Trump has said he'd like a deal by Christmas. NBC's Keir Simmons is in Moscow for us. Keir, you were in the room with Putin earlier today. What are the big takeaways here? Is he overstating Russia's progress in Ukraine as he tries to intimidate Europe?
Yes, he is the honest answer to that, Tom. Russia is making slow progress on the battlefield. That being said, of course, it is a war, and you can't predict a war. Certainly, when he talks about the root causes, what he's talking about, for example, is NATO expansion. And what he means by that is that he will not accept Ukraine getting security guarantees from the West that he thinks are part of those root causes. It's just one of the reasons that I think things are really challenging at this stage. I mean, President Putin calling claims Moscow is planning to attack Europe nonsense, and promising, Tom, there will be no more wars after Ukraine if Russia is treated with respect. It's a big if. It leaves open that question about whether, in fact, the Kremlin is eyeing the possibility of some kind of further conflict. And with more talks underway, I asked him about President Trump's push for peace. Mr. President, if you reject President Trump's peace offer, will you be responsible for the deaths of Ukrainians and Russians in 2026?
We do not consider ourselves responsible for the death of people. It wasn't us who started this war. So saying that we reject anything or turn anything down is inappropriate and groundless. So the ball is entirely in the court of our Western so-called opponents.
Of course, Tom, it was Russia that invaded Ukraine in 2022.
Keir, what else did you pick up on the peace talks? And oh, by the way, for the record, it was Russia who invaded Ukraine, but the U.S. peace proposal that's on the table, the last one anyway, seemed to have been written by the Kremlin itself.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly controversial, that one. And since then, the Europeans and the Ukrainians have kind of weighed in, if you like. This has happened again and again, hasn't it, through 2025. The Europeans and the Ukrainians have weighed in and sort of shifted that document. We haven't seen the full document, but they seem to have managed to shift it. For example, the question of whether Russia should gain territory that it hasn't managed to gain on the battlefield, I think is an open question again now. Look, certainly the Secretary of State Marco Rubio is saying today that the US is not pressuring either side, just trying to see if a deal is possible. And Ukraine continues to fight. It hit another Russian oil tanker, this time in the Mediterranean, the Ukrainians say. Just today, that news coming just as President Putin was talking. So just looking ahead to 2026, I think you've got to say that there is still really an ocean between Russia and Ukraine, and the prospects for a peace deal do still look pretty tricky, pretty challenging.
NBC's Keir Simmons, who is in Moscow for us. Thank you very much. We have some breaking news just into us here. We're learning that the United States has started major airstrikes against ISIS in Syria after President Trump vowed to hit back hard to avenge the deaths of 2 U.S. Army soldiers killed in a terrorist attack in the central part of Syria last Saturday. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez at the White House has the latest. Gabe, a big question around the president's actions against Venezuela as well is whether this is about bringing a regime change in Venezuela, and now we have the situation going on in Syria.
Right. Well, this is a different situation in Syria, Tom. This comes just days after the president, as you mentioned, vowed retaliation after the death of those 2 Army National Guard members from Iowa. But just a few moments ago, we are now hearing from the defense secretary who was confirming these strikes. Pete Hegseth writing that this is not the beginning of a war, it is a declaration of vengeance. And he confirmed that the U.S. Today commenced Operation Hawkeye Strike in Syria to eliminate ISIS fighters. Now, Tom, we are still trying to find out more information about the details of these strikes. But again, the breaking news, the Secretary of Defense confirming retaliatory airstrikes in Syria against ISIS, Tom.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez at the White House watching it all. Gabe, thank you. In just the last few hours, the NTSB has provided an update as investigators work to determine the cause of that fiery plane crash in North Carolina yesterday. 7 people were killed, including former NASCAR superstar Greg Biffle. The NTSB says it still does not know who was flying the plane or what kind of problem might have brought that plane down.
We're talking to witnesses and we're trying to look at or listen to recordings and whatever to see if there was any issue, but we haven't been able to verify anything at this point.
Biffle, his wife Christina, and their 2 children were among those who died. Christina Biffle sent a text to her mother moments before her death saying, quote, "We're in trouble." That according to people who spoke with Biffle's mother. And we're just getting a listen into the dispatch call into first responders as this plane crashed.
Aircraft emergency, 238 Airport Road, 238 Airport Road, cross streets at East Aviation Drive. Same will be Statesville Regional Airport. Aircraft is down. Unknown subjects, runway 28.
NBC's Kathy Park is at the scene there in North Carolina. Kathy, what more did we learn from the NTSB today?
Tom, good evening. So this is the first full day with the NTSB GO team beginning their investigation. And there were a couple of top lines from the press conference earlier today. We learned that the aircraft took off around 10:05 yesterday morning. And Tom, it took just a matter of minutes, exactly 10 minutes before it crashed. Also, we learned from transportation officials that the plane was flying dangerously low. Witnesses describe seeing the plane clipping tree lines, also hitting the fence, and some lighting in the area as well. Here's a little bit more from residents on the ground who saw this crash playing out in real time. Take a listen.
All we saw from our point of view was the plane nosedive into the ground, a mushroom-like explosion, and we felt the heat. We were probably within 100 yards of the crash.
And Tom, it is also worth noting that transportation officials have said that they've uncovered the cockpit voice recorder. It is on its way to Washington, D.C. right now to be analyzed. And Tom, you cover aviation. You know these investigations take some time. We are told that it could take up to 18 months for a full report to be released and up to 30 days for that preliminary report, Tom.
Yeah, these things do take time. Listen, we know that 2 pilots were on board in addition to Biffle, but Biffle owned the plane. How is the community there responding? He was beloved there in North Carolina.
Yeah, Tom, you know, Greg Biffle was an accomplished NASCAR driver, and Mooresville, North Carolina, just a few minutes away from here. It is known as Race City, USA, with a high concentration of NASCAR teams. And we are told by so many NASCAR drivers and those affiliated with the sport that this airport behind me, it's a small airport, but it's a popular one used by a lot of NASCAR teams as well as sponsors. The tragedy, as you can imagine, Tom, has sent shockwaves throughout the motorsport community. Biffle was obviously a talented driver. He was a retired NASCAR driver, but he did so much for the community, especially after Hurricane Helene in western North Carolina. He was an experienced pilot. He actually had his own helicopter and used his own resources to help those who needed it the most after that disaster last year, Tom.
Yep, Kathy Park in North Carolina. Kathy, thank you very much. We have new political fallout inside the MAGA movement at this evening. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik is just now announcing she is dropping out of the New York governor's race and planning to retire from Congress. This coming during Turning Point's America Fest conference in Phoenix, meant to project unity within the Republican Party, but instead it's exposing deep divisions after the death of founder Charlie Kirk, Kirk's widow, calling for unity.
When he was assassinated, we saw infighting, we've seen fractures, we've seen bridges being burned that shouldn't be burnt.
Candace Owens, a prominent MAGA commentator and former Turning Point contributor who worked closely with Kirk, has been spreading unconfirmed theories about his death, calling claims that people connected to his own organization could be involved. Kirk's widow, Erica, urged her to stop those theories. Today, the same free speech fight is also playing out on a bigger stage, with Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson clashing after Carlson interviewed a known anti-Semite. Shapiro calls that irresponsible. Carlson is defending that interview as core to the movement's values. Let's bring in NBC senior politics reporter John Allen, who's in Phoenix right now at the America Fest conference. John, let's start with Elise Stefanik. She just posted on X that she's out of the New York governor's race, retiring from Congress. Is that a surprise? And what does it really say about the state of the MAGA leadership right now?
It's absolutely a surprise. She, like all politicians who withdraw from races, says that she would have won had she gone through with it. Obviously, voters didn't get their choice on that, but it does speak to the fear that candidates have of bitter clashes within the Republican Party heading into what figures to be a tough general election for Republicans, particularly in a state like New York, which has a huge Democratic lean.
John, I need to interrupt you. We are going to a network-wide special report. Please stay tuned, John. And here comes our special report from NBC News.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Tom Yamas. And good evening. We are coming on the air with breaking news right now out of the Middle East. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying that the Pentagon has just launched retaliatory strikes on ISIS targets in Syria in response to an attack that killed American troops last weekend. I want to get straight to our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who joins us live. Courtney, again, these were in retaliation for that ambush attack that happened on those 2 National Guard troops from Iowa.
Yeah, that's right. Just about a week ago, we heard that news, the ambush near Palmyra, which is in central Syria. It's not too far from where the U.S. actually has a military garrison there in southern Syria known as Atan. But Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth today announcing via social media the beginning of what he called Operation Hawkeye Strike. It's an effort to eliminate additional ISIS locations throughout Syria. Now, the types of locations that they're going to hit in these sorts of operations would be infrastructure. So places where ISIS will store their weapons, where they potentially will build things like drones, potentially even places where they will conduct training. Remember, the ISIS presence is not the same as it was a decade ago. It is much more disparate, is much more spread out. They don't have large locations that would be an obvious target point, but Central Command, the regional military command that owns Syria and owns that whole area for the United States military, they always have options for strikes like these. President Trump, in literally the hours after that attack last Saturday, came out and said that he planned to retaliate, and he planned to retaliate big, the U.S. military launching that. The big question now is how and when or will ISIS respond? And I think that is what will dictate whether this Operation Hawkeye Strike ends today or whether it continues for a matter of days or even weeks, Tom.
But Courtney, these initial strikes are not just one and done, right? It seems to be a little bit more widespread than we thought.
It is. I mean, it's the similar kind of locations and targets that we would expect in something like this. So, again, infrastructure, weapons caches, that sort of thing. But the big question now is, were they able to get all of the locations that they wanted to target here? I'm told that this is multiple U.S. military platforms that were involved in this, different types of fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters and military assets. The question is, though, if ISIS hits back at the American presence there, then we definitely we should expect to see continued retaliation from the United States. Based off of the social media posts that we've already seen out of Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, it does not appear that this is something that he will let go if ISIS hits back.
Okay, Courtney, stand by for us. I want to go right to the White House now. Gabe Gutierrez joins us live. Gabe, the president had vowed to get revenge on the deaths of those U.S. soldiers, and that's what we're seeing tonight.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. And just within the past few moments, we got our first reaction from a White House official who tells me that President Trump told the world that the U.S. would retaliate for the killing of our heroes by ISIS in Syria, and he is delivering on that promise. So certainly this is something that the administration telegraphed for the last several days. And also President Trump has repeatedly said, when he's been asked about this over the last several days, that this was in an area of Syria that was not controlled by the new Syrian government. The president, of course, hosting the new president of Syria, who toppled Bashar al-Assad, Ahmad al-Sharaa. He hosted him here at the White House just several weeks ago and has been trying to make sure that the U.S. supports him and does not blame him at all for this strike, or for the ISIS ambush attack on these 2 members of the Iowa National Guard. But again, just within the past few moments, we've received that statement from the White House saying that the president did vow this retaliation, and he's making good on that promise, Tom.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez, stand by for us as well. We are tracking 2 stories out of Washington tonight, not just those military strikes, but the Justice Department just releasing a massive trove of records in the case of the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Our teams of reporters and producers and experts have been digging into those documents. There are thousands of them, including our national law enforcement and intelligence correspondent, Tom Winter. Tom, you're joining us live now. I know everyone's still sort of going through these documents, but it's been an hour or so. What have we learned?
Tom, I'll give you kind of the gist of what we're seeing. The Justice Department opened a website and they published all sorts of government reports having to detail with Epstein, his death, the non-prosecution agreement, which of course garnered so much controversy back in 2007. They've also released a significant amount of court filings, in civil court filings, many of which we've already seen or reported on previously. They do have 4 volumes that appear appear to be new, or at least information that they haven't previously released before in this form. All told, that's 3,500 files. Now, some of those files have multiple pages attached to them. It's totaling more than 2.5 gigabytes of material that includes investigative reports and photos. Some of those photos that we're seeing do involve prominent people in American politics, including former President Bill Clinton. A photograph of him in a hot tub. You're looking at that photograph there. There's an additional person in that photograph, a little tricky to see, whose face is redacted. But, of course, as we've reported in the past, the former president denies any sort of wrongdoing. And it's important to remember that in July of this year, this Justice Department and FBI under the Trump administration has said that there's not even enough new information to even open a case, Tom, let alone bring a successful prosecution against any uncharged third parties beyond Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who were, of course, convicted in the case of Maxwell, convicted in the case of Epstein, died by suicide in a Manhattan federal prison. As far as the other pieces of information that we're getting from this, it does appear that the Justice Department and the FBI did continue their investigation in southern Florida even after Epstein signed that non-prosecution agreement, traveling to Australia to interview a potential victim. And there are a number of case files going back to 2019 when they successfully brought a case against Epstein, or in the process of trying to successfully bring a case against Epstein in 2019 that have to do with the FBI here in New York and the NYPD. Some of that information, Tom, includes photographs that are very disturbing, that are heavily redacted or redacted in full, and some of those have been labeled CSAM, or child sex abuse material. To be clear, the Justice Department has made sure that there are no photographs of any individuals that could identify their faces or any sort of other identifying characteristics in those photographs, but obviously deeply disturbing.
Yeah, Tom, before you go, there have been other sort of strange photographs, if you will. There are some of Jeffrey Epstein with Michael Jackson, but the context of a lot of these photos is still not understood completely at this hour.
You know, that's what makes it so difficult, Tom, is that a lot of these photographs are undated. They come in the form of these files, so we're not clear whether they originate from the FBI's investigation in Florida, whether they originate from any sort of a local Palm Beach Police Department investigation, which, of course, kicked this off. Those case files are in here, too. And it's not clear whether or not those documents were uncovered at Epstein's mansion, when we were told that multiple boxes of photographs were recovered in a search warrant in 2019 after he landed in Teterboro, New Jersey, to the surprise of federal handcuffs. So that's at least the initial indication of this as it stands before Nightly News on Friday afternoon. But, of course, given the size and scope and volume of this, and the fact that the Deputy Attorney General of the United States said earlier today that they are not releasing today all of the documents, they still have more to make public. We don't know yet what is and isn't in these documents.
Yeah, we'll keep digging through those documents as we get ready for the broadcast tonight. All right, Tom, we thank you for that. That's going to conclude this NBC News special report. We're going to have much more, as I just said, coming up on Nightly News. I'm Tom Llamas. We thank you so much for watching.
That was our network-wide special report. This is NBC News Now. We're going to stay on top of both these stories and bring you more as we get it. We're coming right back. We're back, and severe weather is creating travel trouble from coast to coast at this hour, bringing dangerous conditions and serious disruptions already. Powerful winds are sweeping across the eastern third of the country. Nearly 70 million people under alerts from Maine to Georgia. Out west, an atmospheric river is pushing towards California, bringing the threat of heavy rain and flooding. In my home state of Colorado, up in Wyoming as well, 100-mile-per-hour winds are fueling dangerous wildfire conditions there. Those high winds, by the way, already causing widespread damage and power outages, including a building collapse in Connecticut. And it's all colliding with the holiday travel rush, which kicks into high gear today. Let's take a look now at the misery map from FlightAware. More than 7,000 flight delays at this hour in the United States, 500 flights canceled. The FAA has been grounding planes in Denver and Boston, with delays mounting across the board. Just as a record number of December holiday travelers are taking to the skies and the roads between now and actually January 5th. They got a long extended travel period. Let's bring in Michelle Grossman, who's watching the weather picture. Michelle, where is the biggest concern right now?
Hi there, Tom. Great to see you. Well, the biggest concern is out west. We're looking at that atmospheric river, as you mentioned, and we're going to see that over the next several days. It's not just tonight, tomorrow, into the weekend. It's through Christmas Day. We're also concerned about Colorado. I did think of you when I read the news this morning. We have a critical fire danger there in and around the foothills because we have very low humidity, very warm temperatures, and we are looking at some gusty winds there. And winds also in the northeast. I'm running on a generator in my home studio here because we lost power in our neighborhood. We're looking at winds gusting up to 50, 60 miles per hour. So let's go ahead and take a look at the maps here because radar showing us where we are looking at that rain falling. We're looking at rain falling still in the northeast, parts of New England into the northeast. That is an exiting storm, but back behind it, you notice that blue, that is snow falling, really cold air working in. So we're going to see a 30-degree temperature drop from this morning to tonight in portions of the northeast and New England. That's going to really feel like spring to winter, but it's the winds that are really gusty, and that's causing delays and cancellations at Philly, D.C., Boston, New York. And as we know, we have that ripple effect across the country. In the west, you notice green too. You see some darker colors, some reds, the oranges, yellows. That's indicating where heavier rain is falling. And that's going to be the same story tomorrow, Tom, as we go throughout Saturday. We're looking at the heaviest rain throughout portions of the west. The East Coast, though, clearing really nicely for Saturday and also Sunday. Back to you.
Well, your microphone is poppy there, Michelle, so I'm guessing that also is the wind and your power outage, so I hope you get it back soon. Michelle Grossman, thanks very much. Still to come, some new clues today to the age-old question, are aliens really out there? Well, we're learning from one comet's closest ever approach to Earth. Okay, we're back, and the first game of the college football playoffs kick off tonight as the Oklahoma Sooners face off against Alabama's Crimson Tide, which means you've only got a few hours left to fill out your brackets. Which team will claim collegiate greatness at the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day? And if you need a little help with your predictions, we've got you covered. Guess who is here? NBC's Steve Kornacki is at the big board to show off his how do we call this now? The Korbacki analysis, Steve. Give us your preview. Give us the preview for tonight's game and who are we going to see this weekend?
Tom, how about this? For college basketball, we all know about March Madness and the bracket. For college football, it's the second year we've had a 12-team playoff. What do we call this? I don't know. How about December delirium? Something like that. So, as you say, 12-team bracket here. The top 4 seeds in the tournament get byes. They will not play this weekend. These 8 teams will be playing this weekend. The first-round matchups here, 4 games in total. The first one is going to be tonight, as you mentioned, in Norman, Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Sooners, if I can get it up on the screen here, going to be playing host to the Alabama Crimson Tide. The board seems to have been frozen, so let me just tell you a little bit about this matchup, Tom, though. Oklahoma against Alabama. Alabama, probably the most controversial selection into this tournament. They're a 3-loss team. They seem to be tailing off a bit towards the end of the year, and they really just laid an egg. They played in the SEC championship game against Georgia. They were kind of a no-show in that game. You probably heard a lot of noise. Notre Dame and its fans very upset about being left out of the tournament. I think the inclusion of Alabama is the most controversial one at the expense of Notre Dame. So it's going to be Alabama against Oklahoma tonight. Oklahoma known for its stout defense. And then tomorrow, Saturday, 3 games. It's a 3-game feast for college football fans. And some of the matchups here to draw your attention to. I think the other one who was kind of say Notre Dame didn't get in. The other one who was a bit controversial. I don't know what's going on this board. I apologize. The other one who was a bit controversial was Miami. Miami, though, had beaten Notre Dame to start the year. So Miami will play Texas A&M. On paper, probably the best matchup on Saturday, most competitive. I think this one's really interesting. Tomorrow afternoon, Tulane is going to go in to Oxford, Mississippi to play Ole Miss. Remember the drama about Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, brought them to probably their best season in modern times. And then what did he do? He left. He left to coach LSU. So it's Ole Miss, Tulane tomorrow afternoon. And then Oregon, James Madison will be the nightcap. James Madison, Tulane, they're the 2 teams from outside the power conferences, the real Cinderellas here. A lot of people expect them to kind of get rolled over in these games. Could you see an upset here? We've seen those in the college basketball tournament. Sometimes you see those little Ivy League teams, those 16 seeds pull the upsets. Could you see something like that in this tournament? And just here, to give you a sense here of what the expectations are. And again, we say those top seeds not playing this weekend. The favorite to win it all, Ohio State. They did it last year. They're the favorite. Second choice, how about this? Nobody was talking about Indiana football for decades, for generations, until the last 2 years. Indiana actually undefeated. They beat Ohio State for the Big Ten championship. Indiana 3-1, the second choice to win the national title. You see Georgia, you see Oregon, you see, as I mentioned, those two teams from outside the power conferences. Prohibitive long shots in this, but yep, you're right, Tom. Couple hours away. Get your brackets ready. December delirium about to begin.
JMU 750-1 odds. That worries me. I'm going on Indiana. My parents went to Indiana. I'm banking on Indiana. Otherwise, I'm out of the will, I'm sure.
Tom, I got bad news for you. I like them too.
Oh. All right. Steve Kornacki, thanks very much, buddy. All right, to our original now, in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. We've been telling you about the mysterious outer space object that's been sailing through our solar system. 3I Atlas, as you know, 3I Atlas. And the one some people were saying could actually be an alien spacecraft, well, it just reached a big milestone, passing the closest it ever will come to our own planet. It still is really super far away, but it's giving scientists a golden opportunity to find out more about it. My fellow space geek, NBC's Gotti Schwartz, has the story.
Our planet getting its best look yet at the most exciting outer space object we have seen in years. 3I Atlas, a mysterious interstellar visitor billions of years old, finally making its closest approach to Earth and giving scientists an opportunity to study it before it gets further and further away.
It's a golden moment because we have as good a view as we're ever going to get.
Showing the object in stunning new detail, like this one from a civilian astrophotographer who says he captured 3I Atlas shooting across the night sky. There's a caveat. Just because it's the closest it'll ever be doesn't mean it's actually that close. It's 170 million miles away, further than the distance between the Earth and the Sun, says NASA astrophysicist Dr. Tom Statler.
If you could get into an Indy car and drive at top speed 24/7, no brakes, no pit stops, nothing, for your entire life, you might just barely make 170 million miles on the odometer.
3I Atlas was first discovered in July by NASA's massive Atlas telescope, designed to spot potential threats to planetary safety. Most in the scientific community identify it as an ancient comet from another solar system, but others have theorized it could be alien technology. Harvard theoretical physicist Dr. Avi Loeb leading the charge to examine 3I Atlas's possible alien origins.
We have an obligation as scientists is to figure out the nature of the object.
He's outlined a list of anomalies that could point to an intelligent origin, a trajectory that seems designed to tour planets in the solar system, a dust cloud containing much more nickel than iron, unlike most comets, its rotation axis seemingly aligned perfectly with the sun, peculiar gas jets pointed directly at the sun instead of away from it, and a path that kind of lines up with the origin of the mysterious, still unexplained WOW radio signal burst detected back in 1977.
My guess is that it's most likely a natural object, but the existence of those anomalies trigger my interest in trying to figure out whether they might represent something else.
Despite the intrigue, most scientists brush off the idea of alien origins.
All of the signatures from day one have been completely consistent with it being a natural body. It's very much like the comets we know and love in our solar system. It's a comet.
Regardless, the eyes of Earth trained on the object, hoping to peer back through billions of years in time and space before it's too far away.
All of the asteroids and comets in our own solar system are carrying a little bit of the history of how our Earth and how the other planets changed over time. And this one is carrying some of that same information from another solar system somewhere else, and it's been in an interstellar deep freeze for some number of billions of years. It's an amazing time capsule.
Whether it's an ancient comet or an alien spacecraft or Santa come early, one thing is certain: this interstellar flyby has sparked wonder about the universe before sailing off into the eternity of space.
Yeah, Gotti, I know you. You got an X-Files poster in your bedroom, I'm sure. But you know what? I've talked to NASA people, as you have, and they tell me, listen, there are trillions upon trillions of stars out there. Each star has hundreds or millions of planets. So just mathematically, there's a very high chance that there's life out there somewhere. The question is, are we going to get a glimpse of it? Are we going to get another sighting, another comet? What do you think?
I hope so, and I do. I have a poster. I want to believe, but you keep dashing my hopes with the questions you keep asking, those pesky questions. I saw you asking Jared Isaacman yesterday about aliens. What did he tell you?
He did not dismiss it, dude. He did not dismiss it. Nope.
I know. You and your quest for the answer to the most existential question of our time. As for 3i Atlas, this most likely is a comet. A very, very weird one, though, especially this whole anti-tail thing, this off-gassing jet phenomena that we're seeing.
Yeah. All
of the images, the data collected. This is going to be an absolute treasure trove for astronomers for years to come. And even though, yes, 3i Atlas is sayonara now, the biggest takeaway seems to be that we are now getting to the point in humanity that we're getting way better at spotting these interstellar visitors. This is the third one so far that we know about. They do seem rare right now. That could all change soon, but this has brought so much excitement, so much hype. There are going to be so many more eyes, professional and amateur, trained on the heavens. And Tom, do you want to know why?
Please.
Because as they say in science, the truth is out there. Somewhere.
To infinity and beyond, as I said to the administrator. Yeah, we're full of cliches. I believe. I just don't think they've visited us yet. Gotti Schwartz, thanks, buddy. We'll see you tonight on your great program. That is a wrap for us at this hour. By the way, you'll see Hallie on Sunday on NBC Nightly News. Our coverage resumes, I should say, right now. Top of the hour on a Friday, we come on the air with a lot of breaking news. The latest is that the United States has struck key ISIS targets in Syria. The move coming in retaliation for the killing of 2 U.S. National Guard troops last weekend. Details just into us here, straight ahead. And what we are now learning from the Epstein files just published, the explosive photos that we're now just seeing. We're going to talk to an Epstein survivor about how she's feeling this evening. And then the new details on the Reddit user who led police to the suspect in the Brown and MIT shootings, how the manhunt ended with the discovery of the suspect's body in that storage facility. And extreme weather at this hour slamming the coast, really the country coast to coast, threatening winds hitting the east and grounding the flights that are out there. Out west, dramatic water rescues as crews battle dangerous floodwaters, all of it spelling out trouble for the holiday rush that's underway today. And the latest defection from the GOP, a high-profile congresswoman says she is dropping her bid for the governorship of New York and she's leaving Congress. What it says about the cracks showing up in the MAGA base, that's coming up later in the broadcast. Good day, I'm Tom Costello. I'm in for Hallie on this very busy day, and we start with some breaking news just into us here. We are learning that the United States has started major airstrikes against ISIS in Syria after President Trump vowed to hit back hard to avenge the deaths of 2 U.S. Army soldiers killed in a terrorist attack in the central part of that country last Saturday. You're looking at those 2 soldiers who died. The White House said in the last hour, President Trump told the world that the United States would retaliate for the killing of our heroes by ISIS in Syria. He is delivering on that promise. Let's go to NBC's Yamiche Alcindor at the White House. Yamiche, a busy afternoon for you. They say that these are targeted strikes here, but what are we learning about the mission itself?
Well, President Trump just gave a little bit more detail about this mission. But as you said, the president had been vowing to retaliate after those American service members were killed in Syria. Here's what the president's putting up tonight. He said, because of ISIS's vicious killing of brave American patriots in Syria, whose beautiful souls I welcomed home to American soil earlier this week in a very dignified ceremony, I am hereby announcing that the United States is inflicting very serious retaliation, just as I promised, on the murderous terrorists responsible. He went on to say, we are striking very strongly against ISIS strongholds in Syria, a place soaked in blood, which has many problems, but one that has a bright future if ISIS can be eradicated. He also said the government of Syria, led by a man who is working very hard to bring greatness back to Syria, is fully in support. And he went on to say all terrorists who are evil enough to attack Americans are hereby warned. So that's the president tonight laying out really the mission there, saying that not only is this retaliation for, of course, the strike that happened over the weekend, but he's also saying if other people attack U.S. service members, that they too will face the wrath of the United States.
Yamiche, do we have any more specificity of which particular branches of the military were involved here? They're described as airstrikes. And secondarily, do we know how long these strikes might last?
Well, on the second question, on the timeline here, we don't have an exact idea of how long this could last, but the president's making it very clear that this is a mission-focused sort of idea in terms of the idea that he's not going to be limiting this, and that if the U.S. military continues to think that Syria needs to have strikes and needs to sort of be a focus of retaliation, then he's going to continue to do that. We're also still learning the details on what kind of bombs were used and also on which branches of the military were involved. What we do know is that Pete Hegseth is working very closely with President Trump on these strikes, and again, vowing to really continue if we see any other attacks on U.S. military officials.
All right. Yamiche, thank you very much. Yamiche Alcindor at the White House. More breaking news with minute-by-minute developments in the release of the highly anticipated Epstein files as the Justice Department is acknowledging that its document dump is incomplete. So far, we're seeing more than 3,500 files, totaling more than 2.5 gigabytes of photos and documents related to nearly 2 decades worth of government investigations into Epstein's sexual abuse of young women and underage girls. In a letter to members of Congress, the Deputy Attorney General says a review of the material is ongoing and should be completed over the next 2 weeks. Here's what our team is learning so far from these files. Some of these items released are photos that had not been made public previously, and many of these photos are highly sexual in nature. Other documents include heavily redacted phone records. And some photos, like the one we're showing you here, include people you will recognize, like former President Bill Clinton, appearing to show him in a hot tub next to somebody whose face has been redacted. Important to note here, this does not imply any wrongdoing, and we don't know when this was taken or whose face was redacted or what context the photo was taken in. Another photo showing the late pop star Michael Jackson and Epstein in front of a piece of artwork. Again, the context or the timing of this photo is unknown. The White House is saying in a statement just coming into us that the Trump administration is the most transparent in history, going on to say that by releasing these documents, the Trump administration has done more for the victims than Democrats ever have. We've got team coverage on the story. NBC's Kelly O'Donnell here in Washington. Danny Savalos has our legal analysis. Tom Winter is reporting on the developments from New York. Kelly, the Justice Department is saying that there's more to come. Walk us through why it wasn't able to release all of these files. By the way, despite pressure from lawmakers that originally the president tried to block and then gave in when they essentially were going to override him, right?
Today was the deadline, Tom, and yet the Department of Justice is really giving only the first part of its homework and is seeking an extension in the public space. And they have had possession of these records for a very long time. They have done prior reviews of these records. They were at earlier iterations making some of it prepared for release, and then that did not happen in July when the department decided it would not do a further release. So there's no question it's an enormous volume. And there is no question that there are sensitive issues within this, including victims, including personal details about individuals that have been in no way accused of any wrongdoing, but some of their private material that needs to be redacted, and certain categories of privileged information that can be redacted. But basically, the administration is saying, we're giving you something, and that should hold. And they're going to continue to do work. Now, there is a stream of new information that they say they are processing, and that is separate actions to get grand jury material in New York, for example, released. Typically, grand jury material is not released under any circumstances. So that is a new sort of tranche of material coming into the Department of Justice for review. So that will represent some of it. And then we are also not seeing the searchable capabilities that the law required. It is a public website. Certainly there's a lot of interest in this, but we're not seeing the searchability that was a part of the law, which will make it more cumbersome for the public. Perhaps that will sort of deflect some of the interest. If it's harder to find this material, you've got to have a lot of patience to go through it, as our team is finding out, going file by file by file. It's painstaking. And a lot of it is material that really has no probative value at all. Pictures that are not salacious, not important in terms of evidence, and a lot of that mixed in with what may be some new information or insights that could tell us more about the picture of what happened during the many years when Epstein was certainly engaged in conduct that ultimately made him a sex offender and the pariah that he became.
Yeah, Kelly, thanks. Let's talk to Danny. And Danny, Democratic lawmakers have said that they are looking into all legal options if all of the documents are not released today, and they're not being released today. So what could members of Congress, specifically the Democrats in this case, do?
Hard to say, because when you look at the language of the statute, it's a statute without any sort of harsh enforcement mechanism. And there's an old legal term or legal phrase, there is no right without a remedy. And if you have a statute without an enforcement mechanism or a penalty or some consequence for not complying with it, then it rings a little hollow. So that doesn't mean that Democrats are without recourse. They might be able to find some kind of recourse. They may go to the courts. They certainly would have a statute under which to go to the courts if they tried. But the question is, under what jurisdiction could even a court be compelling DOJ to do something like this? Again, without any specific remedy in the statute, it becomes a little difficult to ascertain what exactly Democrats can do.
Tom Winter, some of today's files include, as we said, new and previously seen materials. But what stands out to you right now?
I think Kelly's done an incredible job of giving you the gist of the documents and kind of the framework of what we see here, and the fact that probably most of this is not going to be quite probative as far as future reporting efforts. There are documents in here, for instance, the Palm Beach Police Department case file that we've had that's been, frankly, sitting on my computer for the last 6-7 years, perhaps longer than that. And those are documents and pieces of information that we have used in the course of our reporting going back to 2019 and 2020. So these are not new areas for us to look at. All the redactions are the same. I think a few things do stick out to me. One, you mentioned at the top of the show, Tom, just the volume of this, 3,500 files, but many of those have dozens of pages included within them. So that's just to give you a sense of the scope of it. The second component of this is that we are seeing that the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office did respond to a woman from Australia who reached out to them. We believe we know who that person is. We're in the process of going through the reporting efforts there, who reached out to the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI and said, I've got something to tell you. That happened in 2011, and that happened after Epstein's guilty plea in Florida to state charges, as well as his non-prosecution agreement, which has, of course, sparked so much intrigue in reporting efforts and consternation into this entire episode and entire case. I think the victims are a little frustrated tonight. They're seeing what appear to be victim files that are fully redacted. I think they had hoped that their statements would be made public and available. Now, based on Kelly's reporting, that the Justice Department says, well, look, we're getting a whole bunch of grand jury material. The judge recently approved that in New York as well as in Miami, and that material might be available at some point. That might go a little bit further in satisfying what the victims are looking for in this particular case, which is for their statements to be made public, and also to see whether or not what they say they told investigators matches up with what is actually in the file. So that's something of note. We are seeing a little bit, by the way, of the 2019 case file, which comes from investigators with the FBI in New York and the NYPD, as they clearly meticulously went through person by person, all the victims, all these women here, to try and reach out to ones that they were looking to find, as well as to start to issue grand jury subpoenas to get their testimony memorialized as they move forward with their case, Tom.
Yeah, Kelly, we've heard the White House's framing of this. It sees the release as a win on its part. But it wasn't long ago that the president, as I said earlier, was against releasing this information, right?
Well, the political positioning of the White House is to tout this as transparency, and they have moved forward with releasing some material. However, there are significant redactions. They did not meet the full deadline. There are lawmakers who are saying it doesn't meet the spirit or the letter of the law, and so there are concerns. And the history of this, they've embraced transparency at least to some degree in this moment, but we've seen how the president has previously said this is a hoax, there's nothing there, it's not important. important. We also saw how the Attorney General earlier in the year, when she first came into her position, talked about having the files on her desk and would release a client list. We later learned there is no client list, according to the Department of Justice. And then there was a determination in July that there would not be a release of files, and there was no material in the files, according to the DOJ, that would suggest the ability to prosecute any other individuals for conduct related to this. So then the political pressure weighed in, and that's where we are today. So through the work of victims, through their advocates, through public pressure, through even those in the president's own MAGA universe who have been long asking for information to expose the powerful, the privileged who were engaged in misconduct with especially underage girls. So now we're at a point where the White House is saying, we've done this, it's transparent, with all the superlatives that are known in the Trump era, and yet there are legitimate questions about some of that. They've made some steps forward, but it is not yet complete.
Danny, given all the redactions, and understood that the redactions are meant to protect the women and the girls who were abused here, but you've looked at, I would imagine, years' worth of documents, court documents over the years. Do the redactions seem extensive to you?
Here's one thing you learn especially more in civil litigation than anything, is that redaction's in the eye of the beholder. There are people who made decisions to redact, and they looked at this statute, and there's going to be a lot of wiggle room, a lot of gray area when you're talking about the power to redact or withhold information that relates to this topic or relates to that topic. I knew as soon as I saw the language of the statute, there would be some bitter fighting once the documents were released, and that DOJ would err on the side of redaction rather than disclosure, because that's the safer thing for them to do in their mind.
Danny Savalos, Kelly O'Donnell, and Tom Winter, thank you all very much for your reporting. And Tom, you've got a long night ahead of you. Last question for you. What are you going to be looking for tonight, if you ever get any sleep throughout the night, or maybe next morning? I don't know.
Well, we have a great team here of people going through it, so it's far from my only effort. I think, Tom, based on what Kelly just reported, the idea that we've yet to see the grand jury material, I think that'll be important. And if these redactions were made prior to judges' orders in Florida and New York, making that material available, it is now possible, or it is potentially possible, I should say, that we would see some of those victim accounts be unredacted, or at least redacted in a less obvious way. So that would be more ideal for those of us that are looking to go through it. But I do want to say it's consistent with our reporting. We have been clear. We did not expect any individuals in this that have not been charged for all of a sudden information to come up that would charge them.
Yeah. Tom Winter and team, thanks, everybody. Great job tonight. Yeah. A big day today for the people perhaps most impacted by all of this, the survivors of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Our Hallie Jackson has been speaking with survivors. Here's a moment from her sit down with a group of them just a few months ago.
With the show of hands here, how many of you want to see more documents released publicly related to the Epstein case? Every single one of you. Marika, why?
Alone we are afraid, together we are feared.
Let's bring in right now Danny Bensky, a survivor of Epstein's abuse. Danny, first of all, on what must be a very emotional and difficult day, thank you for talking to us. And I know you've been starting to go through some of these documents. You were just 17 when you met Jeffrey Epstein. Mm-hmm. How do you feel right now about all of this information being released?
It's such a loaded question. There's so much information, and yet not as much as we may have wanted to see. So I think it's such a hard question because there is such so much to sift through. Yeah. There is part of me that feels a bit validated at this moment because I think so many of us have been saying, no, this is real, like, we're not a hoax, we promise. I remember, that there was a tiger in his office. I remember that, there was this painting, or I remember all of these things. And just to see it in picture form like that it's heavy, but it's also like, okay, now the world can see a little bit of what we already know, and feel a little bit of that validation, which feels really good.
So the validation feels good, but is it traumatizing? Nobody wants to see any of you go through more trauma. Is it traumatizing to have this out right now?
I think we were preparing ourselves for it. I think there's always going to be trauma. We carry trauma with us from when we were that age, and we've kept it in the darkest parts of ourselves. And until we get it out there to discuss it in, forums like this, where young girls know that they can talk about these things, it's just going to keep festering.
Yeah.
So while, it's the only way is through, unfortunately.
And we've heard some fellow survivors say they wanted more files out there. Does it feel like justice to you tonight, especially given all the redactions? Does it feel like justice?
Right now, justice is a hard word for me to find because the website is very hard to search. I know that I'm looking for specific things. I know all the other survivors are out there looking for things. I was looking for the FBI agent that I knew I spoke to in 2019, you just can't search anything. If you search Jeffrey Epstein's name, it doesn't come up, right? And so that is complicating matters quite a bit, I think. And I also think that, I was looking for things out of New York and haven't found them yet. So it does feel a bit incomplete at this point to make that call.
So given that, the DOJ has also said it's incomplete right now. More documents are coming by the end of the year, it says. What do you hope happens from here? What do you want to see happen?
I think we as survivors need to come together as a collective and talk about where we go from here. I think there's so much information to digest right now that it's really hard to make that call because we don't even know the breadth of it yet.
Danny Bensky, on a very difficult day for you, thank you for coming in and talking to us and sharing your story with America. And it's important to keep it in the headlines. Danny, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You bet. Well, this evening's severe weather is already creating travel trouble from coast to coast. Dangerous conditions and serious disruptions. We've seen really powerful winds sweeping across the eastern third of the country. Nearly 70 million under alert from Maine to Georgia. Out west, this atmospheric river we've been talking about, pushing towards California, the threat of heavy rain and flooding continues. And in Colorado and Wyoming, 100-mile-per-hour winds fueling dangerous wildfire conditions there. And the high winds are already causing damage. Look at what's happened. We've got power outages, by the way, but look what's happened to a building in Bridgeport, Connecticut, of all places. It's also colliding with the holiday travel rush, which kicks into high gear today, for the airlines anyway. So take a look at the NBC News and the live ATC misery map from FlightAware. 8,000 delays right now and about 500 flights canceled. That's nationwide. The FAA has grounded some flights in Denver and Boston, delays mounting across the board. Just as a record number of holiday travelers for December are taking to the skies and the roads between now and the new year. Emily Aketa is at Newark International Airport for us. Emily, what are you seeing there right now with these windstorms and high winds really ripping through the East Coast right there in Jersey?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Tom. Good to be with you. You can see just how busy it is behind me. The start of what is supposed to be a record-setting holiday travel season, getting off to a bit of a bumpy start. You mentioned those ground stops and delays at some major hubs, especially in the Northeast, like Boston, like here at Newark Airport. We are still facing a ground delay because of wind. Also across the country in Denver, where they're contending with 100-plus mile-per-hour winds. Wind has also been the problem in the Northeast, and we've seen the effects of the weather, from the flooding to toppling of trees onto power lines to collapsing parts of old buildings and, of course, wreaking havoc on the travel situation here. We are anticipating, according to Airlines for America, more than 52 million people to fly to their holiday destination over the next couple of weeks. Today through this weekend is expected to be some of the busiest days for the airports, also the day after Christmas and the Sunday after Christmas as well. We know from AAA that a lot of people are trying to trade in that white Christmas for fun in the sun. 4 of the top 10 most popular travel destinations for this time of year fall in the state of Florida. So for that rush of people, we talked to Tampa International about what they are doing and how they're preparing. Take a listen here.
We are making sure that people can get through our airport very quickly, very efficiently. So that means on our automated people mover systems, we have more train cars that we put on that to accommodate more people. We make sure that we are connecting and coordinating with our food and beverage vendors to make sure that their meal options and they're staffed up appropriately so we don't have long lines.
And we know from AAA that the vast majority of Americans, more than 120 million, which would be a record for this time of year, are anticipated to drive to their holiday travel destination to get behind the wheel. And AAA says they are anticipating that congestion to start to pick up tomorrow. Your trip times could more than double near major cities like Boston and D.C., Tom.
Yeah, we're going to be watching the wind especially. Emily, thank you very much. A heart-stopping moment caught on camera. How one police officer in Michigan saved a child from choking, and the drama of the Louvre. Is it really over in Paris? We're coming back. Okay, it's been a busy day here, and now to another big story we're following. We have new details about the Reddit poster who helped lead police to a breakthrough in the murder of the Brown and MIT investigations, the murderer, I should say, in those investigations. Though a possible motive really still unknown, Rhode Island's Attorney General confirms that the Reddit poster referred to as John, seen in the surveillance video at the same time as the suspect who wears, you can see there, he appears in this blue circle. John is seen walking by in that red circle on your screen. So John told investigators he encountered the suspect multiple times on the day of the Brown University shooting, where 2 students were killed, 9 others injured. Investigators are now saying that the suspect also killed that MIT professor in Massachusetts 2 days later. The suspect and the professor both studied engineering at the same school in Portugal more than 20 years ago. Police have been searching for the suspect for days with seemingly no leads. And then yesterday, the suspect was identified as this man you see there on your screen. And we're now learning he had been dead in a storage unit in New Hampshire for 2 days before police found him. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin following this story for us from Providence, Rhode Island. And Aaron, the question everybody wants to know is why, but it sounds like really police at this point don't have any evidence to answer that question.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. They're still gathering that evidence, trying to answer that question. Authorities to me today said that they believe that the attack on the MIT professor may have been personal, given that they went to school together in Lisbon decades ago. But in terms of the attack here at Brown, they know he had links to the university, that he was briefly enrolled in the physics program decades ago, that he likely took classes in the building that he later attacked. But in terms of why he opened fire on a room full of students that he likely did not know remains a mystery. Meanwhile, tonight, we are hearing from officials in terms of the autopsy results. Officials now estimate, based on those results, that he killed himself on December 16th, 3 days ago, a day after shooting and killing the MIT professor. Tom.
Also, probably worth mentioning that the MIT professor is a superstar, or was a superstar in physics, and the suspect took classes in physics in Portugal, also at Brown University. Do we have any feeling, though, for how he evaded police for so long?
Well, I mean, speaking to officials here in Rhode Island, they are characterizing this as a meticulously planned attack. It is very clear from the evidence they have gathered so far that he really worked to evade authorities. Take a listen to what the Attorney General had to say.
He was not using traditional cell phone service. He was using voice over internet protocol. So he was really using Wi-Fi at unsecured Wi-Fi to access data. He was not using traditional credit cards, which is how, sometimes law enforcement can follow people's movements. None of these are secret techniques.
So the big break in the case came with a man that officials are only identifying as John. John came forward and told authorities that he was in the building hours before the attack when he encountered the suspect, then chased him out of the building. The footage shows him pursuing him on foot. And then at one point, Valenti, the suspect, passed his rented Nissan car. His fob inadvertently set off the lights on the Nissan, alerting John to the fact that that was his car. He recognized that and then later told authorities that car was later the key, I am told by officials here in Rhode Island, to cracking the case and tying the two attacks together. Really extraordinary set of circumstances. Yeah. I asked the police chief if that fob had not gone off, would they have been able to solve this case? He said eventually they would have tracked down every car in this area and reached those conclusions, but it would have taken a lot more time. Tom.
What a perceptive witness that John was and reporting it to police. Aaron, thank you very much. All right, let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you may want to know about on this Friday. Number 1, new body cam video shows a Michigan police officer saving a 1-year-old who had stopped breathing at his home. The baby became unresponsive after suffering a seizure. The officer acted fast, giving back blows until the child began to cry, and we're told the baby is okay now. Kudos to that officer. Number 2, a very polarizing and controversial move in Washington, D.C. as workers added President Trump's name to the Kennedy Center today. As we have reported, the Kennedy Center Board of Trustees, handpicked by President Trump, voted to rename the venue the Trump Kennedy Center. The signs have gone up, even though only Congress can change the name of the center, that under a 1964 law. Members of Congress and the Kennedy family are objecting. Number 3, the Louvre Museum reopened today after staff voted to suspend their strike. You'll remember that union employees blamed things like low staffing levels and long overdue renovations for the walkout. Workers will hold another meeting in January to decide whether to resume the strike. Number 4, get this, Bowen Yang is reportedly leaving Saturday Night Live. No! In the middle of the 8th season. He joined the show as a writer in 2018, became a full cast member in season 47. Yang's final episode airs this Saturday. Hosted by Ariana Grande with musical guest Cher. We reached out to Yang and SNL for comment. We haven't heard back, but boy, will he be missed. Number 5, look at this. A koala taking an unexpected ride on a bus in Australia. Look at that. A bus driver spotted the koala dodging traffic before it climbed a street pole. The driver, worried the koala would get hurt, brought him or her onto the bus, and he then clung to the grab pole like anybody else would on a bus, just like he would if you were clinging to a tree. Wildlife officers named the koala Perry, and they say he or she is doing just fine, safely. One more shot of that. Oh, you missed it. Safely back in the wild. Coming up from us, the search for the thieves who ripped out an ATM in Tennessee. We'll tell you how much money they got away with. Plus, new police body cam video shows the moments after 3 kids fell through a frozen lake in New Jersey. Officers being hailed as heroes yet again. Okay, in just the last few hours, the NTSB has provided an update as investigators work to determine the cause of that fiery plane crash in North Carolina yesterday. 7 people were killed, including former NASCAR superstar Greg Biffle. The NTSB says it still does not know who was flying that plane or what kind of problem might have brought the plane down.
We're talking to witnesses and we're trying to look at or listen to recordings and whatever to see if there was any issue, but we haven't been able to verify anything at this point.
Biffle, his wife Christina, and their 2 children were among those who died. Christina Biffle had sent a text to her mother moments before her death saying, quote, "We are in trouble." That according to people who spoke with Biffle's mother. And we're just getting a listen now to the dispatch call that went out to first responders as the plane went down.
Aircraft emergency, 238 Airport Road, 238 Airport Road, cross streets at East Aviation Drive. Same will be Statesville Regional Airport. Aircraft is down. Unknown subjects, runway 28.
NBC's Kathy Park is at the scene there in North Carolina. Kathy, what more did we learn from the NTSB today?
Tom, good evening. So this is the first full day with the NTSB GO team beginning their investigation. And there were a couple of top lines from the press conference earlier today. We learned that the aircraft took off around 10:05 yesterday morning. And Tom, it took just a matter of minutes, exactly 10 minutes before it crashed. Also, we learned from transportation officials that the plane was flying dangerously low. Witnesses describe seeing the plane clipping tree lines, also hitting the fence, and some lighting in the area as well. Here's a little bit more from residents on the ground who saw this crash playing out in real time. Take a listen.
All we saw from our point of view was the plane nosedive into the ground, a mushroom-like explosion, and we felt the heat. We were probably within 100 yards of the crash.
And Tom, it is also worth noting that transportation officials have said that they've uncovered the cockpit voice recorder. It is on its way to Washington, D.C. right now to be analyzed. And Tom, you cover aviation. You know, these investigations take some time. We are told that it could take up to 18 months for a full report to be released and up to 30 days for that preliminary report, Tom.
Yeah, these things do take time. Listen, we know that 2 pilots were on board in addition to Biffle, but Biffle owned the plane. How is the community there responding? He was beloved there in North Carolina.
Yeah, Tom, you know, Greg Biffle was an accomplished NASCAR driver, and Mooresville, North Carolina, just a few minutes away from here. It is known as Race City, USA, with a high concentration of NASCAR teams. And we are told by so many NASCAR drivers and those affiliated with the sport that this airport behind me, it's a small airport, but it's a popular one used by a lot of NASCAR teams as well as sponsors. The tragedy, as you can imagine, Tom, has sent shockwaves throughout the motorsport community. Biffle was obviously a talented driver. He was a retired NASCAR driver, but he did so much for the community, especially after Hurricane Hallie in western North Carolina. He was an experienced pilot. He actually had his own helicopter and used his own resources to help those who needed it the most after that disaster last year, Tom.
Yep, Kathy Park in North Carolina. Kathy, thank you very much. NBC News covers hundreds of stories each day, too many to read, to watch, to listen to them all. So our bureau teams have selected some highlights from their regions, and we call this segment The Local. From our Southern Bureau, police in Tennessee are looking for the suspects caught ripping out an entire ATM with their pickup truck. So there's the surveillance video. Officers say the suspects even dragged it through a highway, but they gave up when they couldn't open the safe and get the money out. The bank is offering a reward for any details leading to the suspects. From our Northeast Bureau, police rescued 3 kids after they fell through a frozen lake in New Jersey. You can see 2 of them right there, the freezing water reaching up to their chest. An officer tosses a rope out to them, guides them to safety. Pretty compelling right there, and the police say the kids are going to be okay. Good on them. And from our Midwest Bureau, a raccoon bit somebody at a resort in Wisconsin after falling through a ceiling. Guests say it apparently landed right on top of a dining room table. Police and wildlife officers quickly wrangled the raccoon. Not clear if the raccoon, if anybody was injured or the person who was bitten, if that person's been treated, we simply don't know. Police say the raccoon tested negative for rabies. Good news there. And when we come back, how infighting over the future of MAGA is spilling out on the right's biggest stage. Back now with new political fallout inside the MAGA movement. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik announcing tonight that she is dropping out of the New York governor's race and planning to retire from Congress. It comes during Turning Point's America Fest conference in Phoenix, meant to project unity within the Republican Party. But instead, it's exposing really deep divisions after the death of founder Charlie Kirk. Kirk's widow is calling for unity.
When he was assassinated, we saw infighting. We've seen fractures. We've seen bridges being burned that shouldn't be burnt.
Candace Owens, a prominent MAGA commentator and former Turning Point contributor who worked closely with Kirk, has been spreading unconfirmed theories about his death, including claims that people connected to his own organization could be involved. Kirk's widow, Erica, urged her to stop. Today, the same free speech fight is also playing out on an even bigger stage, with Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson clashing after Carlson interviewed a known anti-Semite. Shapiro calls that irresponsible. Carlson is defending that interview as core to the movement's values. Let's bring in NBC senior politics reporter John Allen, who's there at the America Fest tonight. John, I want to go to Glenn Stefanik, but what does he mean, core to the values of the organization? Is he talking about being anti-Semitic or the free speech portion of that?
Well, I think he's talking about the free speech portion of it. Tucker Carlson actually stood up last night and said, I'm quoting him, I'm not an anti-Semite. So obviously feeling a little bit defensive. And it gets at some of the proxy war that's going on here. Ben Shapiro, who is a supporter of Israel, has been very supportive of the U.S. role in Israel, attacking some of the folks who have been less supportive of Israel, including Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. Candace Owens, in her conspiracy theory, has said that she thinks Israel had some part or may have had some part in Charlie Kirk's assassination. So you're seeing a proxy war over that, and a little bit of a proxy war, Tom, over over the future of MAGA and which influencers are going to take hold.
All right, well, let's now go to the other headline of the evening, and that, of course, is Elise Stefanik, who's apparently leaving the governor's race and retiring from Congress all at once. Do we know why? I mean, she was facing a pretty good primary challenge in New York, and what does it say about the state of MAGA right now?
Well, she was facing a good primary challenge in New York, and she, like all other politicians who withdraw from races, insists that she would have won. And of course, we don't get to see that because the voters don't get a choice in that. They don't get to show their preference. But it does speak to the difficulty that candidates are going to have, particularly in a blue-leaning state like New York, if they're not able to rally the Republican base around them, if they're going to have a divisive primary. And one other thing, Tom, I wanted to add about that fight with the MAGA influencers going on. I caught up with Jack Posobiec, who's one of the big conservative influencers. He's speaking at this conference. I asked him what he made of the fight between Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson, and he said, quote, I think it's great. It got a lot of clicks. So some of this, of course, is theater, and some of it is very serious and substantive.
So, John, you're a veteran political reporter. How do you decipher, then? How do you decipher how much is just meant for the clicks and how much of it is substantive and suggests a real division developing within MAGA?
Look, at some level, a conference like this doesn't work unless there's some conflict. And because all of these people have been united behind President Trump, opposed to Democrats and liberals, it's tough to find that conflict. But you're getting it on the stage here. Most of the folks we talked to said that they think it's good to have an airing of differences and that ultimately they will come back together.
John Allen, nobody does it better. Thanks, buddy. John Allen, who's in Phoenix. Still to come from us, some new clues today to the age-old question, are aliens really out there? Who better to answer that than Gotti Schwartz? Okay, we're back, and the first game of the college football playoffs kick off tonight as the Oklahoma Sooners face off against Alabama's Crimson Tide, which means you've only got a few hours left to fill out your brackets. Which team will claim collegiate greatness at the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day? And if you need a little help with your predictions, we've got you covered. Guess who is here? NBC's Steve Kornacki is at the big board to show off his how do we call this now? The Korbacki analysis, Steve? Give us your preview. Give us the preview for tonight's game and who are we going to see this weekend?
Well, Tom, how about this? For college basketball, we all know about March Madness and the bracket. For college football, it's the second year we've had a 12-team playoff. What do we call this? I don't know. How about December delirium? Something like that. So, as you say, 12-team bracket here. The top 4 seeds in the tournament get byes. They will not play this weekend. These 8 teams will be playing this weekend. The first-round matchups here, 4 games in total. The first one is going to be tonight, as you mentioned, in Norman, Oklahoma. The Oklahoma Sooners, that I I can get it up on the screen here. Going to be playing host to the Alabama Crimson Tide. The board seems to have been frozen, so let me just tell you a little bit about this matchup, Tom, though. Oklahoma against Alabama. Alabama, probably the most controversial selection into this tournament. They're a 3-loss team. They seem to be tailing off a bit towards the end of the year, and they really just laid an egg. They played in the SEC championship game against Georgia. They were kind of a no-show in that game. You probably heard a lot of noise. Notre Dame and its fans very upset about being left out of the tournament. I think the inclusion of Alabama is the most controversial one at the expense of Notre Dame. So it's going to be Alabama against Oklahoma tonight. Oklahoma known for its stout defense. And then tomorrow, Saturday, 3 games. It's a 3-game feast for college football fans. And some of the matchups here to draw your attention to. I think the other one who was kind of say Notre Dame didn't get in. The other one who was a bit controversial. I don't know what's going on with this board. I apologize. The other one who was a bit controversial was Miami. Miami, though, had beaten Notre Dame to start the year. So Miami will play Texas A&M. On paper, probably the best matchup on Saturday, most competitive. I think this one's really interesting. Tomorrow afternoon, Tulane is going to go in to Oxford, Mississippi to play Ole Miss. Remember the drama about Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, brought them to probably their best season in modern times. And then what did he do? He left. He left to coach LSU. So it's Ole Miss, Tulane tomorrow afternoon. And then Oregon, James Madison will be the nightcap. James Madison, Tulane, they're the 2 teams from outside the power conferences, the real Cinderellas here. A lot of people expect them to kind of get rolled over in these games. Could you see an upset here? We've seen those in the college basketball tournament. Sometimes you see those little Ivy League teams, those 16 seeds pull the upsets. Could you see something like that in this tournament? And just here, to give you a sense here of what the expectations are. And again, we say those top seeds not playing this weekend. The favorite to win it all, Ohio State. They did it last year. They're the favorite. Second choice, how about this? Nobody was talking about Indiana football for decades, for generations, until the last 2 years. Indiana actually undefeated. They beat Ohio State for the Big Ten championship. Indiana, 3-1, the second choice to win the national title. You see Georgia, you see Oregon, you see, as I mentioned, those 2 teams from outside the power conferences. Prohibitive long shots in this, but yep, you're right, Tom. Couple hours away. Get your brackets ready. December delirium about to begin.
JMU, 750-1 odds. That worries me. I'm going on Indiana. My parents went to Indiana. I'm banking on Indiana. Otherwise, I'm out of the will, I'm sure.
Tom, I got bad news for you. I like him, too.
Oh. All right. Steve Kornacki, thanks very much, buddy. All right, to our original now, in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. We've been telling you about the mysterious outer space object that's been sailing through our solar system. 3I Atlas, as you know, 3I Atlas. And the one some people were saying could actually be an alien spacecraft, well, it just reached a big milestone, passing the closest it ever will come to our own planet. It still is really super far away, but it's giving scientists a golden opportunity to find out more about it. My fellow space geek, NBC's Gotti Schwartz, has the story.
Our planet getting its best look yet at the most exciting outer space object we have seen in years. 3I Atlas, a mysterious interstellar visitor billions of years old, finally making its closest approach to Earth and giving scientists an opportunity to study it before it gets further and further away.
It's a golden moment because we have as good a view as we're ever going to get.
Showing the object in stunning new detail, like this one from a civilian astrophotographer who says he captured 3I Atlas shooting across the night sky. There's a caveat. Just because it's the closest it'll ever be doesn't mean it's actually that close. It's 170 million miles away, further than the distance between the Earth and the Sun, says NASA astrophysicist Dr. Tom Statler.
If you could get into an Indy car and drive at top speed 24/7, no brakes, no pit stops, nothing, for your entire life, you might just barely make 170 million miles on the odometer.
3I Atlas was first discovered in July by NASA's massive Atlas telescope, designed to spot potential threats to planetary safety. Most in the scientific community identify it as an ancient comet from another solar system, but others have theorized it could be alien technology. Harvard theoretical physicist Dr. Avi Loeb leading the charge to examine 3I Atlas's possible alien origins.
We have an obligation as scientists is to figure out the nature of the object.
He's outlined a list of anomalies that could point to an intelligent origin, a trajectory that seems designed to tour planets in the solar system, a dust cloud containing much more nickel than iron. Unlike most comets, its rotation axis seemingly aligned perfectly with the sun, peculiar gas jets pointed directly at the sun instead of away from it, and a path that kind of lines up with the origin of the mysterious, still unexplained WOW radio signal burst detected back in 1977.
My guess is that it's most likely a natural object, but the existence of those anomalies trigger my interest in trying to figure out whether they might represent something else.
Despite the intrigue, most scientists brush off the idea of alien origins.
All of the signatures from day one have been completely consistent with it being a natural body. It's very much like the comets we know and love in our solar system. It's a comet.
Regardless, the eyes of Earth trained on the object, hoping to peer back through billions of years in time and space before it's too far away.
All of the asteroids and comets in our own solar system are carrying a little bit of the history of how our Earth and how the other planets changed over time. And this one is carrying some of that same information from another solar system somewhere else, and it's been in an interstellar deep freeze for some number of billions of years. It's an amazing time capsule.
Whether it's an ancient comet or an alien spacecraft or Santa come early, one thing is certain: this interstellar flyby has sparked wonder about the universe before sailing off into the eternity of space.
Yeah, Gotti, I know you. You've got an X-Files poster in your bedroom, I'm sure. But you know what? I've talked to NASA people, as you have, and they tell me, listen, there are trillions upon trillions of stars out there. Each star has hundreds or millions of planets. So just mathematically, there's a very high chance that there's life out there somewhere. The question is, are we going to get a glimpse of it? Are we going to get another sighting, another comet? What do you think?
I hope so, and I do. I have a poster. I want to believe, but you keep dashing my hopes with the questions you keep asking, those pesky questions. I saw you asking Jared Isaacman yesterday about aliens. What did he tell you?
He did not dismiss it, dude. He did not dismiss it. No.
I know. You and your quest for the answer to the most existential question of our time. As for 3i Atlas, yeah. This most likely is a comet, a very, very weird one, though, especially this whole anti-tail thing, this off-gassing jet phenomena that we're seeing. Yeah. All of the images, the data collected. This is going to be an absolute treasure trove for astronomers for years to come. And even though, yes, 3i Atlas is sayonara now, the biggest takeaway seems to be that we are now getting to the point in humanity that we're getting way better at spotting these interstellar visitors. This is the third one so far that we know about. They do seem rare right now. That could all change soon, but this has brought so much excitement, so much hype. There are going to be so many more eyes, professional and amateur, trained on the heavens. And Tom, do you want to know why?
Please.
Because as they say in science, the truth is out there. Somewhere.
To infinity and beyond, as I said to the administrator. Yeah, we're full of cliches. I believe. I just don't think they've visited us yet. Gotti Schwartz, thanks, buddy. We'll see you tonight on your great program. That is a wrap for us at this hour. By the way, you'll see Hallie on Sunday on NBC Nightly News. Our coverage resumes right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.